line all the way north to Danshui Station, you can still see the fort that the Spanish built is still there today. So the Dutch and the Spanish were here for a few decades, bringing in things like Christianity and some medical knowledge as well. I always hear references of these missionaries hoping to pull out the decayed teeth of the indigenous people, giving them dental care and spreading their gospel. Which is why today actually a lot of indigenous people in Taiwan are Christian. It's because of this influence. But very quickly the Dutch grew tired of having a competitor on the island, so they drove the Spanish away. To understand what happens next in Taiwanese history, let's take a look at two things. Number one is the situation going on in China. Number two is the legacy of pirates. Which one sounds more interesting?
Pirate.
Pirates? Pirate? Okay, we'll go for pirates. So during this time, with world trade becoming more and more lucrative, piracy was also very profitable. It was the most profitable, none other than the pirate king of the South China Sea, Zheng Zhilong. You can think of him like a Chinese Jack Sparrow. He was always attacking other pirates, attacking Chinese ports, looting goods. He actually posed such a headache for the Ming Dynasty of China at the time. Guess what the Ming Emperor did to deal with this man. I actually had people guess this correctly. He actually hired him to be the military general of the South China Sea. All the kids on their field trip. There's so many of them. So he actually hired him to be the military general of the South China Sea. He was very effective as a military general because he could keep all the other little pirates at bay. He actually grew quite loyal to the Ming Emperor. Now, looking back on what was going on in China at the time, the Manchurians were invading from the north, forcing the Ming Dynasty further and further south until finally defeating them. So, now that the Manchurians built the Qing Dynasty, they also captured this pirate king turned military general, put him under house arrest for the rest of his life. But his son remained loyal to the Ming Emperor. He thought, I'm gonna avenge my father. Take down the Qing Dynasty and revive the Ming Dynasty. He had no more territory left in China to cultivate his army. So what did he do? Yes, he came to Taiwan. He thought, okay, I know the Dutch are in Taiwan. I'll come to Taiwan, I'll defeat the Dutch, and I'll take over their fort as my base. The Dutch actually lost so badly. Left with nothing but their personal belongings, all their treasures and all their weapons. They couldn't take away. For a big colonizer around the world to be defeated by a family of pirates, maybe the pirates did pretty well. So the Pirate King family came to Taiwan, but this dream of going back to China and when they'd taken back China was never really realistic to begin with. So very quickly the Qing Emperor sent troops to Taiwan, squashing this rebellion. So now Taiwan fell under the rule of the Qing Dynasty. The Qing Emperor was not very interested in Taiwan. China's so big, Taiwan's so small and far away. What are they even going to do with this island? Actually, the general that led the attack on Taiwan had to convince the emperor to see the military and economic value of Taiwan, to even include it in the Qing Dynasty map at all. Even then, they still didn't develop Taiwan much at all. In fact, they tried to stop people from coming here. At the time, people who were living on coastal China, a lot of the fishermen and things like that, found the living conditions very difficult. They were always being attacked by pirates, and it was difficult to grow crops and things like that. So a lot of people wanted to come to Taiwan to seek a better life. But the emperor was worried. What if too many people come here? They start another rebellion. I don't want that. So he put a sea ban across the coast, but it never worked. Actually, the population in Taiwan started to grow and grow during this time from migration. Eventually, actually also bringing the indigenous population further into the mountainside. So now, after a couple of 100 years or so of this, the rest of the world started getting interested in Taiwan again, especially the Japanese and the French. They were launching some small attacks, trying to find a way in. Even in the purchasing Taiwan, although this never went through. So this caught the attention of the Qing emperor, who thought, okay, if everybody else wants Taiwan, maybe Taiwan's kind of important. So he started to develop Taiwan, especially building the old town city walls around Taipei to better defend it, developing things like the electrical system, a railway system, and a telegraph system. This is the beginning of modern development in Taiwan. It only lasted a couple of decades or so before the Qing dynasty lost Taiwan. Who did they lose Taiwan to? Yes, coming back to this building over here, the Japanese. So during this time, Japan was looking at what Europe was doing around the world, and they were thinking, Europe, when I grow up, I want to be a colonizer just like you. They're especially looking for territories in northern China. So there was a war between the Japanese and the Chinese. The Chinese lost this war, so in their treaty, they signed and gave Taiwan over to Japan. Taiwan became Japan's first colony. They were very excited to have their first colony. Before this, the Qing dynasty actually did not rule into the mountainous regions, and they had a very loose control over Taiwan. When the Japanese came here, they went into each and every neighborhood, even deep into the mountainside, taking down the names, occupation, family backgrounds of each and every person, really studying the population, studying the natural habitat of Taiwan as well. So they built this building as a colonial museum to show off to foreign powers that came here to visit. This is the land that they had conquered, and this is its culture, this is its all the different types of plants and animals that you can find here as well. So even today, if you don't have time to go all around the island, but you'd like to learn more about Taiwan, I really recommend this museum as well. It's also very beautiful inside. This was during the Meiji Restoration era of Japan. Have we heard of this Meiji Restoration era? This was a time of westernization for the Japanese. They were learning a lot of science and technology from the Europeans, but also arts and aesthetics. They wanted to make Taiwan a model colony to show off what they had learned. So that is why they built these types of Roman, Greek Roman, neoclassical types of buildings here in Taiwan. Later on our tour, we'll see a lot more of these buildings. And there's a small design detail you can't see here, but you know how on the Roman columns, at the top, there are often these curly cues, right? But which way do the curly cues usually go? Going in, out, going outward. Yes. So the Japanese, you can't see this here later at another building, I'll point out to you this design detail, they make their curly cues go inward to show that this is a Japanese trademark. It looks like a European building. It's built by the Japanese. Yes. So the Japanese came to Taiwan, they further developed the railway system, really connecting the north and the south. This was a time also for the Taiwanese, where finally the whole island was under one centralized government. It's kind of how Taiwanese identity started to develop as well, and kind of in resistance to this Japanese government. Of course, on their way of, especially in the beginning of their rule, of dealing with uprisings was quite violent, so they started to have this sort of Taiwanese identity that sort of started to really blossom during this time. So the railway system, further also bringing in modern inventions like clocks, with ideas of timeliness, orderliness, and cleanliness that didn't really exist in Taiwan before. It's kind of like the Japanese told the Taiwanese, okay, well, the train is going to be there at 5 o'clock. Of course, you also have to be there at 5 o'clock. Make a line to wait for the train. Don't spit your betel nut juice on the ground while you're waiting. And timeliness, orderliness, and cleanliness, I think, are still things that really impact Taiwan society today. The streets are relatively clean with the way we handled COVID and things like that, like still influence from this time. Of course, not everything was great under the Japanese rule. We're talking about their way of dealing with uprisings, was very violent. They also had a severe segregation policy. So in order to try to really keep the Japanese people and the Taiwanese people separate, for example, Japanese kids would go to one school, Taiwanese kids another school, and the mountainous regions, the indigenous kids also have their own schools as well to learn Japanese. Fast forward to the beginning of World War II, Japan started needing the help and the loyalty of the Taiwanese people. They started the Japanization of Taiwan. They started to really encourage Taiwanese people to speak Japanese, take on Japanese names. They even took Taiwanese history out of the school curriculum, only teaching Japanese history. So not everybody knows that there was this period of pretty intense Japanese influence in Taiwan. But fast forward to the end of World War II, what happened? Of course, the Japanese lost the war. So being a colony of Japan, Taiwan also lost it. Right? Or did we? Because if we take a look at what was going on in China at the time, there was the Chinese Revolution, ending the Qing dynasty and ending imperial rule in China. So when the Japanese lost the war and signed a treaty giving up Taiwan, there was no Qing dynasty to return Taiwan to. There was a question mark over the authority of Taiwan. There was kind of figuring out, okay, who runs this place? At the same time, there was the Chinese Civil War between the Chinese nationalists and the Chinese communists. The international powers, mainly the US at the time, decided, okay, they will give Taiwan to the Chinese nationalists to support their war against the communists. So that's why when you come to Taiwan today, you see the flag, official name of the country. What do we see? We see Republic of China. It's because of this period of history. We'll learn a bit more at the next stop what happened to Taiwan after the arrival of the Republic of China. But first, I'm going to please give each other some applause. We're getting through 400 years of history. You were very focused the whole time. Thank you so much. Do we have any questions? Yes. Back here first.
What language did people speak in Taiwan before Japanese came back?
Right, so the indigenous tribes, they each had their own language because I think Taiwan has so many mountains. Everybody kind of had their own language. The people who migrated here from coastal China, they speak, so today we call it Taiwanese. At the time, maybe you would have called it, it was kind of related to the Hokkien language. Some different dialects merged together. It had influence from Japanese, and some indigenous language influences as well. And also, that's what today we call Taiwanese or Hokkien. Also, Hakka. So Hakka is another sort of a group of people who migrated to Taiwan from China. Yes, they're more related to the Austronesian. Yeah, so they kind of, I think, like distantly related to the, like Austronesian people. Yes, so the bowls are by Taiwanese artists from the early 20th century Taiwanese artist. So he was very inspired by field work and farm work in the early times in Taiwan. So at the time we relied a lot on these types of bowls for the farms.
How long was it a Japanese colony?
Sorry?
How many years was a
Japanese here? 50 years, 1895 to 1945. All right, any other questions? Well, if you have questions, you can feel free to run up to me along the way. We'll continue this way.